Good afternoon. I'm Hannah Arterian, and I'm fortunate to be the Dean of the College of Law here at Syracuse University. Thank you very much, Governor Cuomo. And I want to thank some of our distinguished guests, former Congressman and former Oneida County DA Mike Arcuri, District Attorney Bill Fitzpatrick, and Syracuse Common Council President Van Robinson. It's wonderful to have you here to announce and discuss this important legislative package. Governor, it is really important for all of us that you're here with us today, not only as an elected official, but as a leader who is working to restore trust in our government, and as an individual who looks toward our future with a sense of optimism and hope. Recent events remind us that maintaining the integrity of our government is paramount, regardless of our political beliefs. We cannot be misguided or lose sight of the importance of a strong democracy. I know today our students at SU will go on to become tomorrow's leaders, and it is important that we set an example of true public service, as well as ethical and professional behavior. And at SU, I think we hope and believe that we set our standards for service and integrity very high. The governor's proposals represent an important step and a moment for us to pause and think about how we move forward together and what principles we will embrace. There is nothing more sacred or essential to our democratic society than our electoral process. We are a better state and a better nation by making it more inclusive, particularly instilling a sense of civic duty into our youngest adults. In addition, a public sector with integrity is something we must always continue to strive for, and that responsibility lies with each of us. These reforms that will be outlined today to prevent public corruption, modernize New York's voting laws, and reduce the influence of money in that political voting process are very important to our state. It is now my pleasure to introduce Jeremy Kreelan, Special Counsel to the Governor for Public Integrity and Ethics Reform, who will provide further insights.
Thank you very much, Dean. And it's a great pleasure for us to be here and to talk with you today about reform. I'm going to just give you some of the highlights of the governor's reform package. And as you know, the governor's already made a great deal of progress in this and in many other areas, obviously in Albany. 2011, the Public Integrity Reform Act provided unprecedented reform in a whole host of areas relating to ethics and disclosure. And today, the governor provides the next chapter in the reform agenda. Now, you all know the recent headlines. There's been renewed evidence of corruption in Albany, and today the governor proposed a three-part reform proposal. And the first part is the Public Trust Act. And the Public Trust Act relates to the criminal laws. Now, and these are just some of the highlights. It does many things, but these are just a few. Now, under current law, DAs have to prove, in order to prove bribery, they have to prove an express agreement or understanding between the person who's offering the bribe and the public official. That's not true under federal law. It's a lot easier to prosecute bribery under federal law, and this package would conform New York state law to the federal law and allow and facilitate the prosecution of bribery by public officials. Next, it would establish a new crime, corrupting the government, which would, for the first time, allow DAs to prosecute private individuals who conspire with public officials to defraud the government. And those private individuals would face not only prosecution, but up to a 25-year sentence and a lifetime ban from doing business with the state, getting contracts and other forms of business. In addition, it would make a new crime for a public official's failure to report bribery. You can't really solve this problem unless you address the culture of corruption, and this would enlist everyone in the solution. In addition, any official convicted of any one of these public corruption crimes would be banned for life from receiving state contracts, as this is true of the private individuals as well, from holding elected office, from serving as a registered lobbyist, or being, for example, a Medicaid provider. In addition, under current law, the DAs, when they prosecute these sorts of crimes, can only ask the court to require the defendant to pay back the illegal gain, the amount that they gained illegally from their misconduct. Under this law, they would be allowed to ask the court to require the defendant to pay up to 3 times that amount, which is obviously a much greater disincentive to the corruption in the first place. Second, election reform. We all know that one of the critical ingredients to holding public officials accountable and making sure that they understand that they are under public scrutiny, not only for their conduct but for their misconduct, is making sure that voters are engaged and can register easily and vote easily on Election Day. The first key reform here is with the State Board of Elections, which, as you know, although it does a lot of great work, its enforcement is limited and it's impeded too often by partisan gridlock. This bill would establish a new independent chief enforcement council appointed by the governor, which would have independent investigative authority to investigate violations, to prosecute offenders. It would have the authority of a DA to convene a grand jury and prosecute offenders under criminal law and civil infractions, and to impose penalties. Now, you also may know that New York State routinely is at the bottom in terms of voter registration and voter turnout. One of the steps that this bill takes to address that is to allow 16 and 17-year-olds to pre-register to vote in high school or at driving schools, and then when they get to 18, their information is confirmed and they're automatically registered to vote, which is key because young people, if you get them in the system early, they will continue to vote for a lifetime. The bill would also make ballots, reduce the clutter on our ballots, make them much easier to read on Election Day. It would expand the voter registration period from 25 days before the election to just 10 days before the election, so that when people get excited about an election, they're able to register at that time instead of waiting until after the election. And it would allow candidates and voters to change their party enrollment before the next election rather than under current law, which requires that change of enrollment to take effect after the election. So just when people are excited, they're engaged, they want to change their enrollment, get involved in a party, they're unable to under current law. That would change. Last but not least, campaign finance reform. The governor's proposal would address a key problem, which is the shadow groups that pay for independent expenditures, ads that will influence an election. No one knows who's paying for them, where the money is coming from. That would stop under this bill. Full disclosure for any ad that advocates for the election or defeat of a candidate. And in addition, and this applies to candidates and parties as well, all candidates and parties and these independent political committees would be required to disclose contributions within 48 hours of receipt. The bill would lower contribution limits for all state offices, lower limits to the party housekeeping accounts, to party committees, and would also reduce the contributions from corporations. In addition, it would close what's called the LLC loophole. LLCs under current law are treated as individuals, so they can give, LLCs can technically give sometimes $100,000 over the course of a year. They'd be treated as individuals, they'd be treated as corporations instead, and their contributions would be limited to $1,000. In addition, it would create a public financing system modeled on the New York City system, where private contributions up to $175 would be matched at a rate of $6 to $1. There would be strict limits in place on the amount of public financing a candidate could receive to protect the taxpayers, and this system would bring in new talent into our elections and empower small donors, not just the large donors that we see currently. And finally, this bill would restrict and tighten the definition and the restrictions on personal use of campaign funds. Contributions could only be used for expenses that are directly related to elections or public duties. To say these reforms are needed is a dramatic understatement. They're needed now, and the legislature should take them up. Thank you very much. I have the pleasure of introducing former Congressman Arcuri, great district attorney, and Congressman, thank you, and also now a leader in the fight for reform in New York State. Thank you.
Thank you, Jeremy, and welcome, Governor. It's great to have you here in Syracuse today. First and foremost, I would like to applaud the Governor for his commitment to restoring the trust of the people of New York State to their government. Under his leadership, we have made much progress, but it is clear that much work remains to be done. The Governor recognizes that for government to be effective, we need citizens to not only trust and believe in our election process, but to actively participate in elections. That is why we need campaign finance reform. Right now, unfortunately, many New Yorkers think campaigns are financed by major corporations and by wealthy donors. And they feel that their voices and the contributions that they can afford are too small and too insignificant to really make a difference. As a result, New York has the smallest percentage of the total population who contributes to political campaigns, and that needs to change. To give the average New Yorker a real voice in elections and to promote our democracy, the Governor has proposed to establish a public financing system. This system will be based on the successful model currently in place in New York City. To protect taxpayers, there would be limits imposed on public financing, and there would be a new unit to oversee the system at the State Board of Elections. Additionally, loopholes in party housekeeping accounts will be closed, and limitations on individual contributions will be lowered. These reforms are necessary and will help to bring change to an election system that is clearly unfair and not working for the average voter. New York's elections should not be up for sale to the highest bidder, and the Governor's proposals will help to ensure that elections and campaigns in New York are honest, fair, and accessible to every voter. These changes are smart, they're practical, reasonable, and they're long overdue. And I urge our legislators to take swift action to pass this bill and to help restore confidence in our election process in New York. It's now my pleasure to introduce a man who around here needs no introduction, a very good friend of mine and former colleague, the District Attorney of Onondaga County, Bill Fitzpatrick.
Thank you. Mike Arcuri was, as he said, a very, very dear friend and a great colleague for a number of years. And if you ask Mike privately, even though his resume reads like a small novel, he'll tell you that the greatest job he ever had was that of being a district attorney. Governor, thank you very much for being a governor's not bad, you know. Thank you very much for the honor of introducing you, and also the privilege to say a few words about the Public Trust Act. Governor Cuomo, who I first met as Attorney General Cuomo, immediately established with the prosecutors in New York State a high level of credibility, not only because of his own personal integrity, but because of his competence and his long record of achievement. In prosecuting crimes, and Mike could be the first one to tell you this, it's a very difficult process. People expect you to make them whole again when something tragic has happened. Maybe it's a father who has abused a child or someone who has killed someone's loved one, and they want you to bring justice